You are listening to the audio version of my first book, Brick by Brick, a memoir. Chapter 1. I always knew there was more than what I saw around me. When I was coming up in Augusta, Georgia, watching everyone around me either have routine-ass lives or get caught up in the street life, I knew that wasn't going to cut it for me. That wasn't the life I wanted for myself. And believe it or not, it was social media that helped me realize I could have more than my surroundings. Instagram, specifically, it was like a preview. Seeing picture after picture of other people living their best lives and having so much only showed me that I could have it too. And I was determined to get it, even if I wasn't exactly sure how. So yeah, you could say Instagram changed my life. It's crazy, but it's true. Let's get into it. I certainly didn't get where I am easy. My life has been movie of the week material from the jump. My folks divorced when I was 6 months old. Maybe a baby wasn't in their plans when they met at McDonald's and fell for each other. Regardless, they couldn't afford to take care of me, and I ended up getting shipped from house to house. Imagine what fun that was, bouncing around the hood, a different school every year. I wasn't off to the greatest start. Thankfully, I was able to avoid a lot of the things that were happening to some of my friends. Drugs, gangs, jail, early death, even 9-to-5 jobs. No disrespect. I just knew that wasn't for me. The hood can be a black hole that will suck you in, and I saw too many people disappear into it. I didn't want that to happen to me, and even if I didn't always know where I'd end up, I was determined not to end up there. I fight like hell to avoid it. Thankfully, everything changed when I landed with my Uncle Herbert. I was about 14 then, and that was where I needed to be. My uncle was the one who taught me about the value of hard work, as cliche as that sounds. It's kind of wild to think that something like working at a fruit stand was so pivotal in shaping my mindset and had such a big hand in my future, but it absolutely was. So yeah, for room and board, I helped him run that small roadside stand selling fruits and vegetables. That was my first lesson on how to run a business and be on top of my shit. It might not have been the most fly first job or something people would think would make such a difference, but I didn't care what anyone thought about it. It was definitely what I needed, a life changer for me. Then came the church. My uncle was a deacon, and he had me up in there every Sunday. But it was far from a punishment or something I had to be forced to do. I really became devoted to building my own relationship with Christ and learning about faith, which will certainly become beneficial to me later in life. It was a fortunate thing for me to have people around me to help build my own foundation and learn some valuable lessons. And along with all those valuable lessons about God and faith, church also strengthened my work ethic. I was there to learn, but I was also there to work. And after the sermons, I cleaned the building. And then, music and I had our first kiss. Noodling around on the church piano was my introduction to instruments. After I finished my work, I sit down there and play around on it. I took to it immediately. That sparked something in me, and it was on from there. My interest in music grew like a seed after that. I got into making beats and would spend hours at the library computers working on them before I finally got one of my own. I was inspired by producers like Jay Dilla, Shawty Red, D Rich, and Fat Boy, and started rapping when I was in high school. It became all about cooking up more and more beats, and the lunchroom became my stage. It got to be like a drug, which kind of explains how I got my name Bricks. I became addicted to making dope beats and stacking them like a dealer. After school, I'd rush home and jump back into it. I'd tell myself I'd only work on beats for like an hour or so, but that would easily stretch to all-night sessions, burying myself in my craft. I had found what I loved to do, and I couldn't get enough. Eventually, I graduated high school and got ready to get the hell out of Augusta. I was about to head off to college at Atlanta Tech, learn as much as I could, and make some serious things happen for myself. Things were on the way up, or so I thought. Chapter 2. When you find something you like to do, you look forward to getting back to it when you can. You fit it around all your other things and maybe even spend most of your free time at it. But when you find something you love, though, it hits a bit different. It becomes like an itch you have to scratch. It consumes you and gets to be all you think about. At times, it can even overtake other important things in your life, like work or school. This was the case for me when I headed off to Atlanta Tech. I had every intention of focusing on my studies, but that studio was calling me. I loved it. I worked a lot with the singer Jacquees when I was there, when I was supposed to be in class. The funny thing is, I wasn't even all that naturally good at music. There was no prodigy situation going on here. I was just hungry for it. It only took a couple of weeks before I was spending more time there than I was in school, working for free. It didn't matter. The education I was getting there was far more valuable than whatever I could learn in any classroom, and I threw myself into it, knowing the money would come later. Unfortunately, that didn't help with the bills I had then. My fire and determination for my craft might have been good with helping me build my skills and get a name in people's heads, but it wasn't putting any money in my pockets yet. So like a lot of young and dumb folks do, I did young and dumb shit. And it was just my luck. When I was leaving the studio one night, I got my first taste of police brutality, complete with a gun to my head. I was just coming out of the studio and they bum rushed me, yelling at me, "Get on the ground." Scared the shit out of me. Turns out, they thought I was selling drugs. I guess they thought I was someone else. It was a total coincidence, and just my luck, that I actually did happen to have drugs on me. Certainly an experience I'll never forget. I ended up in jail for 10 days for weed. And that was bad enough, but when I got out, the problems didn't stop. There was an eviction notice waiting on me on my door, which was like a kick in the gut. That was a setback, but thankfully, I was able to crash at my friend's mom's crib. Of course, I was still getting my studio time in, and studio sessions aren't exactly quick. Long hours are the norm, and I often wouldn't get in till really late, like 4 in the morning. Between that and the fact I came in smelling like weed, it was only a matter of time before I wore out my welcome. Next thing I know, I was getting put out again. But this time, I didn't have anywhere else to go. My car became both my home as well as my transportation. I tried to find a job, anything, to get some money in my pockets, but all I was doing was piling up rejections. No one would give me a chance, and my situation just kept getting worse. I was literally homeless, sleeping in my car. This was exactly the kind of thing I wanted to avoid when I was back home and why I left. Showering in gas station bathrooms and stealing food to feed myself wasn't the vision I had when I left Augusta, but that was my reality. It was the lowest point in my life, no question. Despite that though, I managed to keep my eyes on the prize. Circumstances might have been dire, but a part of me knew that was only temporary. This wasn't how my story was gonna end. My love for music was still there, and I knew that somehow it would help pull me up. Even though it looked like I didn't have a lot going for myself, I still had something of value. So what, people wouldn't give me a job flipping burgers at Checkers or standing behind some cash register at Dollar Tree. I even got rejected by the one-legged lady at Delta for the bag carrier position, and they didn't even have anyone else. Working at a fruit stand was the only job I ever had, and that pretty much translated to no experience for these people. Whatever. Something like that would only last me for so long anyway, because I still wasn't trying to settle for some basic life or some basic job anyway. So I had to put my thinking cap on. It was time to hustle and use what I had to get things moving. And all that time I spent in the studio hadn't been for nothing. I had beats, and I started selling them to pay my bills, along with engineering. And with each beat I sold and each engineering session I did, I got a little more traction out of the gutter. More people were learning my name and seeing what I could do. And I knew it was only a matter of time before that led to an opportunity. So I had to keep hustling. Finally, I caught a break that changed things for me. times don't last, tough people do. That's the saying, and I'm a personal witness. Being homeless and deemed not even worthy of carrying folks' bags would take a lot of folks out, but I wasn't about to let that happen to me. I was as low as I'd ever been. But I knew that would only last so long until I'd be rolling again. And sure enough, I got a big push in the right direction. When I got an intern at Penthouse Recording Studio, everything changed. Me and 3 other interns, including my boys Moses and Biscuit, were basically in engineering boot camp, interning under the late Seth Firkins. Seth was known for his work with Young Jeezy and Future. The same way I threw myself into beat making back in high school, staying up all night and whatnot, I threw myself into this. I was finally around some real artists, and I was trying to soak up everything I could from all of them, not to mention my mentor, Ty Harris. Greatness was all around me like an aroma, and I loved the smell. Hell, when I was sweeping up the floor outside the studio, they were working on the Watch the Throne album a mere feet away. Imagine being so close to something like that, and all you're able to do is sweep the damn floor outside of it. But it wasn't always going to be like that. I was like a fly on the wall, taking full advantage of being around people like then up-and-coming producers Murda and Metro Boomin. Whatever I needed to do, run errands, answer the phone, whatever, I was down. It was all about building relationships and earning their trust. I wanted to be sure that when the time came and I had a chance to show them my skills, whenever that might be, they'd trust me enough to give me a chance. The studio became where I spent most of my time. I would engineer so long until some nights I just crashed there, surviving on Chinese food from the restaurant downstairs. Thankfully, I knew better than to think any of this was beneath me. I was paying my dues and biding my time. I didn't mind the work. I loved it. I craved it. While grinding with the engineering, doing daily sessions at Penthouse, I managed to save enough to get a small apartment in the hood on Moreland Avenue, complete with the brothers shooting dice right outside the door. It was a small step that I was grateful for, but I was hardly there. I was spending most of my time in the studio, and it was during that time that I met Grizz and Cash, who are a part of my team today. Most of my time and energy went towards learning the ins and outs of everything that had to do with the studio, from business to engineering. I wanted all the knowledge. I started doing sessions, and one of my first ones was with the artist named Black Boy the Kid, who later changed his name to Rich the Kid. Rich had started working with some up-and-coming artists from the North Side, and he invited me to work with him at a studio on Metropolitan Parkway. It was a small building behind a gate, which might not have looked like much from the outside, but there was some real work going on in that place. I started meeting and working with a lot of people there, like Skipper the Flipper, Lil Duke, not to mention P, Coach K, Quavo, Offset, Takeoff. Sound familiar? It was priceless exposure and education, and I was eating up every bit of it. While engineering for Migos at QC, I also started engineering Future, Rocco, and Young Scooter back at Penthouse Studios. Even though I had envisioned all of this for myself, and I always knew my situation was going to improve, it was still kind of tripping me out that I was getting to work with all these people, and I had no doubt about being able to hold my own. All the work I had been putting in only fueled my confidence. All I had to do was keep grinding, and I had every intention of doing just that. Things might not have always been so smooth, but there were several times when I felt like I got signs that I was making the right move and on the path towards where I was trying to go. One of the big ones came after I had a session with Mike Will. I had a session scheduled right after Mike, and I sat in the chair he had just gotten up from. One thing flashed through my mind. I'm next. My turn was coming. Chapter 4. While I was still at Penthouse, I got an internship at Hot Beat Studios. Now, this was a huge deal because Hot Beats were where all the majors went. Legends were born there. We're talking about people like Drake, Lil Wayne, Nicki Minaj, the list goes on. I was among the big dogs. When I walked in the door and saw all the plaques on the walls from all these big time artists in the game, I couldn't help but just stand there in awe. I might have just been an intern, but the fact that I was even there was a big deal to me. It really felt like I was making it, and I knew that whenever I got the chance to show what I could do, I'd be ready. That chance came one day when the owner of the studio called me and asked me if I could take over a session in place of the head engineer. They had never asked me this before, and I was so shocked. I had no idea that earlier that day, the main engineer was playing around in the studio with his girl. Turns out while they were playing, chasing each other through the studio, she accidentally slammed a door on his finger and cut it completely off. Crazy story, right? So to the studio manager, I replied, "Hell yeah, I can." It was my first major session and the opportunity I had been working towards. I was engineering for Kevin Gates, and I was excited to finally get a chance to show my skills. I'm not gonna front, I was also nervous. If I messed this up, I might not get another chance. I had to kill it. Thankfully, I managed to check myself enough to focus and do what I needed to do. After a few great sessions, Kevin and I had developed a good rapport and things were going amazingly well. So when the head engineer came back, complete with a fake finger, ready to take his spot back, Kevin didn't want him. He wanted me. That certainly caught the engineer off guard, and while I hadn't exactly been expecting Kevin to say that myself, I honestly wasn't too surprised. By then, Kevin and I had such a good vibe that it was no shock that he wanted me to keep going. So I had another foot in the door. I felt like, as far as I'm concerned, this was a pretty big jump for me. And when Kevin hit me up and asked if I could make a beat for him right here on the spot, I was down and I did my thing. The session went great. I made the beat and all was well. But something told me that there was something different about this. I knew this had to be something big. I wasn't wrong. And a couple weeks later, the label called me to let me know they wanted to use my beat on Kevin's album. What? This is my first major album placement. It was a huge, huge deal. This is the kind of shit people worked for and grinded towards and spent hours and hours in the studio for. Hell, it was what I was working towards. And it was finally starting to pay off. We negotiated and agreed on a price for the beat, and I used the money as a down payment on a car. At this point, I still hadn't moved out the hood, but thanks to everything that was happening, I was riding pretty high. But of course, something had to come and yank me back down to earth. 2 weeks later, after getting a car, I got it stolen while I was at the mall. And that was jacked up enough. But the bigger kick in the gut was losing what was inside of it. I had both my laptops with all my beats and everything I had worked on up until this point. We're talking years of work gone. I was devastated. I just couldn't believe it. But I didn't have time to break down. I had to keep pushing. I kept working at the studio, saving my money, while building a rapport with artists like 8 Ball, MJG, Rich Homie Quan, and Young Scooter. The instance with Kevin Gates hadn't been a one-time thing, and I was getting more and more opportunities to show my skills. I couldn't let myself focus on what I had lost with the car and the laptops. I couldn't feel sorry for myself or get mad at the world. As far as that went, it was what it was. As far as that went, it was what it was. All I could do was keep moving forward. Fortunately, though, the police called me and let me know they found my car. The not so good part was that it had been totaled in a police chase. But I got a check for $4,000 out of it at least. By then I had already saved up $3,000 from selling beats and engineering, and I decided it was time to take a big leap for myself. I found a house in Midtown on Craigslist. It was small and on a back street, but I saw potential in it. I met up with the owner and broke it down for him, explaining how I wanted to use the space for my studio. All I had was my vision and $7,000. No pay stubs, no tax receipts, or anything else to show that I was financially worth taking a risk on. Dude could have just laughed in my face and kicked me to the curb, but he decided to take a chance on me. He agreed to take the money I had and threw me another bone by giving me 2 free months to build out the studio. After making the down payment on the building, all I had left was about $600. I used that to get another car, but it was just something cheap to get me from A to B. My studio was called Apex. This was big, and I knew it. This was gonna be my baby. I was starting my own shit, and I had put everything I had into it. One thing about my time at QC, Penthouse, and Hot Beats was that I had a decent clientele from interning, so it wasn't like I was starting from nothing where nobody knew me. I had already begun proving myself engineering, and now I had to prove myself on another level to show I could build my own studio and run my own business. Failure just was not an option. Knowing I needed some help, I hired the guy that built Hot Beats to help me build my studio. I was working day and night, focus mode on high. Every dime I made went right back into Apex. I didn't care about sleep, going out, girls, none of that. My mind was on making my dream work, and I had to make it work. Most people have a story or an instance that sticks with them and becomes something they never forget, be it good or bad. And I had a pretty damn good one when I got a call to cover a session at Mean Street Studios. I was over at Hot Beats, and I got a call from Slade the Monster. We had become friends while I was interning at Penthouse. His girl was going into labor, and he needed me to come take over the session for him. Okay, I got that. No sweat. So I got over there, and Slade was nowhere to be found, and he wasn't answering his phone. But the receptionist was expecting me, and she led me to the session room. And I was amazed at the high level quality of everything, not to mention all the plaques adorning the walls. It was like the first time when I walked into Hot Beats, times 3. Mean Street was definitely the nicest studio I had been in at that point. The receptionist showed me the room where the session was being held, and a woman was sitting there. And good gracious, she was beautiful. One of the most beautiful I ever seen. I managed to keep my cool though, and we ended up kicking it for a minute, just talking and watching television. She was mad cool, and we fell into a natural rapport. As nice as it was though, I didn't think a whole lot of it. That is, until I found out who I had been talking to. I had went to the bathroom, and the assistant stopped me. "Hey, you know who that is?" They asked me. "No." "For real? That's Lauren London." Well, damn. Kind of wild somebody had to tell me, because she was certainly well known by then. But it honestly didn't register to me when I saw her. So while I'm processing that I had just been shooting the breeze with Lauren London without even realizing it, I went back in the room. By then, there was a tall, slender man in there with his back to me. When he turned around, he introduced himself as Nipsey. Nipsey Hussle? There was no way in hell I was going to blow this opportunity. We went ahead and got to work. Everything was smooth. Nipsey and I hit it off really well. Another successful session. This was just the first of a couple dope encounters at Mean Street, because over the next couple days, I met DJ Drama and Don Cannon, who were like childhood idols for me. DJ Drama was on the radio back in the day when I was about 14, and I told him I used to call his show and tell him I'd work with him one day. The fact that I was actually getting to meet them was just another good sign for me that I was on the right track. Turns out I had made a good enough impression with Nipsey, because he asked me if I had any beats. I absolutely did, and he recorded on a couple of them. Those songs never got released, but the important thing was that Nipsey had become yet another person that knew my name and knew what I could do. So by now, I'm engineering and recording at a pretty high level. People knew the name Bricks, and my reputation was continuing to get stronger. One day while I was in a session, a group of guys came in. It was Young Thug, Rich Homie Quan, Birdman, and a young producer named Wheezy. Talk about excited. This had turned into another amazing opportunity, and we ended up doing a song called Choke for Nipsey's album. Young Thug liked my style and the way I work, and got me to engineer on songs like Check on the Barter 6 album, racking up more and more of those album placements. All of this was great, but I wasn't yet to the point where everything I was doing was reflected in my lifestyle. While my skills and confidence might have been on a high, my dollars weren't. At least, not the dollars I was keeping in my pockets. I was still working my ass off, but any money I had made was being poured into my studio, Apex. But this wasn't something I was broadcasting. If I was short on cash, nobody needed to know that. So, when we were all in the studio one day, Nipsey started asking anybody, did they want food, and they were taking orders. There was no way I was going to let anybody know I literally only had $5 on me, and I was starving. But I certainly wasn't going to embarrass myself by asking them to pick me up a value meal while they're all eating steak and seafood. So I just ignored my growling stomach, and I said I wasn't hungry, diving back into my work. So when they left to get food to eat, I slipped out, I got me a large fry, and went back to what I was doing. Being able to treat myself to nice meals was the least of my issues, though. Everything with my cheap car wasn't exactly on the up and up. I had no insurance, no registration, and for a bonus, my license was suspended. I was riding dirty in every way you could ride dirty. But at the time, I didn't feel like I had much of a choice. I had figured out I'd be alright as long as I was careful. It's not like I was out in the street that much anyway. What trouble could I get into parked at the studio, which is where I spend most of my time? Well, I thought I was caught when I walked out the studio one day and there were police right there by my car. My paranoia was instantly on 10. It might have just been a coincidence that my car was right there and they were standing around, but I didn't want to take any chances. I had too much going on to risk getting in trouble over something like car registration or suspended license. So, since there was no way in hell I was going to get into my uninsured, unregistered car with the police right there, I walked home. At 3 in the morning, I just strolled right by them like it was nothing, not even glancing at the car. And had they asked me if the car was mine, I was fully prepared to lie. I didn't love the walk, but I had always made a career out of doing what I had to do, regardless of how uncomfortable it was. But thankfully, the car was still there the next morning, untouched. I suppose you could call this a little bit of good luck. Things with my career were going better and better also. Life for me consisted of waking up, hitting the studio with Nipsey, Playboy Carti, Young Thug, and taking whatever money I made that day to the guy that was working on building my studio. This was day in and day out. There was no sleep, but there was also no complaints. Especially when I got to meet Nicki Minaj in one of those sessions. It would have been nice to get a picture with her, but I admit I was too proud to ask for it. So everything was progressing along fine until I noticed things weren't quite right with the contractor I had hired for my studio. Dude was showing up all late, and when he was there, he was slacking off. The 2 free months the building owner had graced me with were coming to an end, and I needed to get this done. I didn't have time for bullshit. But things came to a head when I found a needle on the site. This man was actually doing meth while I was paying him to build out my studio, and I found out he was stealing on top of that. We were getting into arguments back and forth, getting nowhere, and soon I realized that I was just wasting my time, so I fired him. That might have gotten rid of one headache, but it left me with a huge other one. The studio still had to be finished, and now I had no one to finish it. I couldn't afford to hire someone else, and I didn't know the first thing about building a studio, so basically, I was stuck. Chapter 6. Things were starting to dry up a little over at Hot Beats. The main engineer was sexing the girl that made the schedule, leaving him with more sessions and me with less. It wasn't like I could start sleeping with her too, not that I wanted to, but I had to come up with a way to get the money flowing again. My studio still had to be finished, and there was no way that was going to happen without money. I had a few faithful clients, and thanks to my reputation I built up, I asked him to bail me while I got my shit together. In the meantime, I had to get creative and improvise a little. Rent on the house I was using for my studio was $1,500. So I needed to pull in at least $50 a day to make that. I got really good at being a one-stop shop where people would come in, tell me what they wanted, I make the beat right then, record it, and bang. They leave with their song every time. And most of them didn't even know it was my studio. I didn't walk around telling everybody I was the one in charge. I just acted like a regular employee. So if they had any beef with the prices, I could just blame the owner. One less headache. Real clever, but things were still moving too slowly. All of my money had gone to the contractor and into the studio. Things at Hot Beats had grinded practically to a halt. Slade was back and had resumed his position at Mean Street after his girl had their baby. Great for them, but it kind of left me assed out. I wasn't about to ask anyone for money. This one was on me to figure out. But I didn't have any other options, so I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. Every Sunday, I was in church praying for guidance. My faith in God hadn't waned since my uncle had me working in the church when I was a teenager. I knew he was in control of all of this. I couldn't do it on my own. I couldn't make my own phone ring. All I could do was put it in his hands and trust him. One Sunday, I got a little divine intervention. While I was there praying, there was a tap on my shoulder. I turned to see this lady who said God told her to give me something. That something was $200. No joke. I couldn't even tell you what this woman's name was next to me, but she was an angel sent from God. I just thought it was just what I needed at the right time and a sign that I shouldn't give up. My studio still had to be finished, and I had no contractor. I had already poured so much money into it, I had to figure out a way to get it across the finish line. And you know what they say, if you want something done right, do it yourself. So I rented some tools from Home Depot, hit up YouTube tutorials, and got to work. Everything from lights to flooring, I taught myself how to do it. Even built my desk from scratch myself. Just call me Bob the Builder. I threw myself into that manual labor, just like I had thrown myself into work at the fruit stand with my uncle back in the day, learning how to make beats in high school, and engineering at Penthouse. My mission was official, and there was no stopping until it was done. It was super hard, but I was up for the challenge. Todd from Penthouse, he did me another solid by letting me have a bunch of old furniture after they had bought new stuff over there. I continued to work, building and getting things together, and everything started to take shape. Apex was finally coming along, and I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. This was gonna happen. In 2014, Apex officially opened and we hit the ground running. We had daily sessions going on, and I was working 24/7 recording and doing beats for clients like Offset, Pablo Juan, Jose Guapo, DJ Darrell, Kevin Gates, Waka Flocka, along with dozens of other up-and-coming artists, as well as scammers and drug dealers. They were actually our main source of income, and I wasn't mad at it. This had went on for months, and while I was thrilled at how well things were going, I know I needed to bring in some help. One person can only do so much by themselves, so I hit up Busy, who is an old producer friend of mine, with the collab offer to help me run the studio. He agreed and brought his own clients with him. Things got crazy busy after that. The studio stayed booked. We were bringing in some good money, but I still wasn't spending any of it on myself yet. By then, I had built a pretty good relationship with the building owner, and he told me he had a 6-bedroom house available just a few miles away. I jumped at it. Apex was about to get a sibling, so I saved my money to buy the house and use it as a second studio. Things were booming so much, it only made sense. It didn't even matter to me that the house was in the hood. Busy held things down at the first studio, now referred to as Apex East, while I worked on building out the new one, Apex West. And you already know I was working around the clock to get it done, even living in the house as I did. Since I had a little experience doing this by now, things didn't move at a snail's pace like they did when I was building out Apex East. I started renting out 4 of the rooms at Apex West, bringing in some more money. Because I had earned so many people's trust, it wasn't a problem for me to get people in. But as great as this was, I again needed some help to run everything efficiently. It was time to hire some interns. So in exchange for free studio time, I got a few interns in there, some of which made the absolute most of their opportunity and went on to do some major things. One of them was Quay Global, who later became the go-to producer for rapper Lil Baby. I was real cool with Benzino and his son Chavo, who brought a shop producer with him, and he rapped and made beats as well. I could tell he had some skills and a lot of potential, despite how shy he was. My instincts turned out to be right, and now he's known as Pierre Bourne, who produced for Playboi Carti and 6ix9ine. It was kind of hard to believe how well things were going, considering it hadn't been that long since I was kneeling in church with no options asking for guidance. Here I was, 22 years old and in huge demand, holding relationships with some major artists and 2 studios that stayed booked. Since I was about my money and not too hung up on who it's coming from, there were a lot of drug dealers and killers who were using my space as well. Again, they were responsible for the bulk of the money coming in, and while that was fine with me, it looked a little suspect to folks on the outside. Private investigators started sniffing around, making sure we weren't a front for some major drug operation. Despite how any of my clients made their money, everything that went on in the studio was on the up and up. And thankfully, after a while, the investigators left us alone. Nothing to see here. I had worked way too hard to risk losing it over something stupid. Business was booming, and to say I was on a pretty big high was an understatement. Then I got a major shakeup randomly while watching television. I was in a session one day recording when a story came on the TV about a man killing 2 policemen in New York.
Police departments around the country are telling their personnel to be extra vigilant this morning after the killing of 2 officers in New York City. Officers Rafael Ramos and Wenjen Liu were shot execution-style Saturday in their patrol car.
The suspect who shot and killed himself had a long history of crime and unstable behavior. Police say Ismail Brinsley posted online messages saying he was acting out of vengeance for the deaths of Eric Garner and Michael Brown.
When they showed a picture of the killer, I kind of thought it looked like Moses, who interned with me back at Penthouse. But I didn't think there was any way it could possibly be him. So I called my boy Ty jokingly and asked about it. "Hey man," I said, "why Moses kill those police?" "I don't know, man," Ty replied. His voice was somber. My smile immediately disappeared. Shit. This wasn't a joke at all. That was really Moses, and he really had killed 2 police officers. I was totally floored. There's nothing anyone could have told me that would make me believe that he was capable of such a thing, but I was seeing it with my own 2 eyes right there on the television screen. And for an extra kick in the gut, Moses was killed in return. Between that and how well both studios were doing, I knew it was time to shake things up. I didn't want to get too comfortable and rest on my laurels. As grateful as I was for everything I had done and built in Atlanta, I knew I had the skills to go beyond that. I wasn't going to be limited to one city, so it was time to branch out. I was off to LA.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. This is the captain speaking. Just about ready to depart. We should be away on schedule next.
Chapter 7. So now I was on the West Coast, but my hustle and work ethic hadn't changed. I booked a room in a friend's apartment, still going back and forth to Atlanta to check on things while networking and getting studio time in LA. Instead of feeling like I was starting over, just felt like I was expanding. It would take some time, but that never stopped me before. One day, I decided to venture out to Beverly Hills for the first time and do some shopping. While I was in a boutique, there was a short, white, bald guy with glasses who most people might not have paid much attention to, but he looked familiar to me. Then it hit me who he was. It was 40, as in Drake's main producer 40. I wasted no time going over to introduce myself. He was cool enough to talk to me for a little bit, even took a picture with me. When I boldly told him that I was going to work with him one day on one of Drake's albums, he could have just brushed me off, but instead he said, "Can't wait." This chance meeting was all the confirmation I needed to reassure me that I was doing the right thing, moving to LA. I have no idea if 40 actually took me serious or not. He probably heard all kind of declarations about what people were going to do or claims of how much somebody wanted to work with him and Drake, only for those people to fade to black 5 minutes later. Well, I wasn't going to be one of those people. He was going to see me again, and I was going to find a way to work on Drake's album with him, even if I didn't exactly know how I would make it happen yet. After being in LA for about 6 months, things were moving along all right. I was still making connections and getting a lot of time in the studio, even more confident in my decision to move out west. So when New Year's Eve rolled around, while most people were out partying and whatnot, I was in the studio. Granted, I was drunk out of my mind, but still, for a reason I still haven't figured it out, I booked a plane ticket to Paris right then and there. And if that wasn't crazy enough, I booked another one to Tokyo 10 minutes later. Of course, I had never been to either of those places, and by New Year's morning, I had forgotten I had booked the damn tickets. So you can probably imagine my surprise when I got an email a couple days later confirming my flight to Paris. I couldn't believe I had actually booked a plane ticket to a country I've never been to and where I don't speak the language. But instead of canceling it, I packed my bags. Something told me that this was something I needed to do, as crazy as it was. I remember talking to a producer at some point that lived in Paris, so at least I knew one person there. Off to Paris I went, taking French lessons during the flight. I'm not gonna front. I was a little nervous, but I was also excited. I had a gut feeling that this trip was going to be another step in the right direction. When I arrived in Paris, it was like a whole new world for me. Being in a new culture like that was really invigorating and boosted up my creativity. I hit up my producer contact there and started working with some French artists, which was a trip because they were so excited and fascinated by me. I linked up with other producers and made some valuable contacts, but my trip wasn't 100% work. I took full advantage of my time and did a lot of sightseeing while I was there, taking in the different food and the surroundings. It really opened up my mind, making me want to dive into my craft even harder. When my week-long impulsive work vacation was up, I headed back to Atlanta, but I knew Paris wasn't going to be a one-time thing. I had fallen in love with the city and would most definitely be back. It had officially ignited a desire to see new places and experience more new cultures. Before I could do all that, though, I had to get back to Atlanta and check on things here at the studio. I had been running things from my phone while I was in Paris, but Busy, Quay, and Pierre were holding everything down just fine. Turns out, my trip had been good in another way as well. Because of my being gone and everything, it only made people anxious for me to come back. I was in high demand, a nice byproduct that meant that I could charge more for my services. A week later, it was time to fulfill my second drunken obligation and head to Tokyo. I officially had the international travel bug. After that, I was booking flights to a bunch of other places like Colombia, Thailand, and Dubai, which is where I met someone that put me on to books. I never had been much of a reader, but books were treasure troves of information and lessons that I never realized. Reading had become a constant for me, another way to improve myself. In some ways, reading helped raise me and mature me as a man. This wasn't just some meaningless thing I was doing in the little spare time I had. Allowing myself to become immersed in books was another pivotal moment that I didn't even realize I needed until it hit me. It's crazy how life works like that, showing you what you need before you know you need it. I was in Australia with some producers I met on Instagram when I got another one of those signs. We were in a bar and I was waiting on my ride to come pick me up. When I headed outside, I got the butterfingers and dropped my phone, shattering it. Great thing to happen when you're in another country trying to find someone. Thankfully, my ride and I still managed to link up, and when he heard what happened to my phone, he offered to give me an old iPhone of his. I thanked him and took the iPhone. As I searched through the phone, I realized there was one book on there. It was Think and Grow Rich, which was currently the book I was reading on my other phone, so that was a good sign in my mind. I headed back to LA, and during the flight I used Instagram again to make a connection that was going to lead to
So I
my
want to
next
share a quick story,
monumental
explain with you who I
experience.
am and what I do. My name is BricksDaMane. I'm a music producer from Atlanta, Georgia, and I don't work with the biggest artists in the world: Drake, Gunna, Lil Wayne, Young Thug, Lil Baby. You name it, 21 Savage, I don't work with them. And not only was I able to do that, I done spent the last 3 years helping hundreds of producers just like you start from absolutely nothing and start selling their beats, getting their first sales, getting their first placements, getting their first plaques, even some people getting record deals, bro. You need to surround yourself with people that have accomplished the things that you want to do in your life if you want to win. And that's why I created the Producer Pathway. What is that? The Producer Pathway is the #1 community for producers where we're growing, learning, connecting, and simplifying the process of producing. You're going to get access to 5 hours of course videos taught by me. You're also going to get all of my kits, all of my loops, all of my MIDI packs, every single thing that I have to offer. You're going to get. Also, I'm going to give you a copy of my newest book, Brick by Brick, where I started from absolutely nothing and told the story about sleeping in my car to working with Drake and working with the biggest artists in the world, how you can do the same thing. You're also going to get access to the Bricks Academy Lite, which is a super light version of my 6-week-long program where producers learn how to sell their beats, get placements, start networking, and start getting progress. You need to be around people that build you up instead of break you down, and that's why we do weekly Zoom calls with the industry's top producers so you can connect with them one-on-one and start networking. Bro, for everybody that's on this video right now, I'm gonna do something so special. I'm gonna offer all of this stuff at a price that is truly ridiculous. If you're a music producer or a beat maker, this community is for you. Lock in right now and become a founding member before the price goes up, guys. You're gonna be getting weekly calls, kits, MIDIs, plug-in presets, melodies, copy of my book, a copy of my course, a copy of my... Actually, I just did a viral content creation guide. I also put that in there. It's a whole bunch of awesome stuff, guys. The time to act is now. Join the community. Just remember, sometimes it's the smallest decisions that could change your life forever. Get around people that are winning, that can show you that everything that you need to know to take your career to the next level. This could change everything for you guys. Click the link, join the community, and I'll see you guys there.
Chapter 8. Ever put in work on opposite sides of the country on the same day? Since I was always trying to think ahead and have my hands in something, I hit up Lil Duke on Instagram on my flight back to LA, offering to get some work in. Duke invited me on over to the studio, so when I got in town, I did a session there with Young Thug, Trey Songz, and Young Jeezy. The session went very well, but I didn't have time to hang around LA after it was over. I had to get back to Atlanta. And as it turned out, these guys did too. So I worked with Thug in LA and Atlanta on the same day. My one-day cross-country sessions with Thug was something to remember, but even something bigger was on the way. The next day, Thug hit me up on FaceTime with a question. Yo, you the travel guy, right? Which was a nickname I had at the time. Sure am. And the next thing I know, he was sending me a ticket to Baltimore and telling me to get there ASAP. I got my shit together with no hesitation, and I went. I knew this was going to be something big, and I wasn't going to waste time wondering or second guessing. My life was about to change again. Thug sending for me had to mean something, right? Turns out it did. There was a car waiting for me when I landed in Baltimore. It took me to a big black tour bus. I met the whole gang: Weezy, Gunna, Lil Duke, Strick, Jerica, and TM88, the DJ. Thug was going on tour, and for the next 2 years, I'd be right there by him. But instead of it being a party on wheels, like some people might think a tour is, this one was non-stop work. I was constantly engineering on the studio that was on the back of the bus during the 10-hour drives from city to city, working with one artist until they got tired, and then moving on to the next one. It was back to back to back. My only breaks on the bus were coming when I crashed on one of the bunk beds everyone had. We'd get to a city 2 hours before showtime. Sometimes I'd stay on the bus and finish whatever I was working on before joining everyone. We walked to the venue, and there would be crazy long lines of people waiting to get in. When we got backstage, while Thug was getting ready for his show, I was making connections with various celebrities, continuing to get my name in as many people's Rolodexes as possible. Every city, it was something different. Folks like DJ Khaled, Erykah Badu, Wyclef Jean, and Kendrick Lamar. And I was cool by association, since I was with Thug's group. I was able to get into stuff that I never would have otherwise, like private parties that lots of people would have gave their kidney to get into. I'd be right there on stage while Thug was performing, and when the show was over, it was off to the next city. There was no downtime or sightseeing. It was right back on the bus, putting in more work. And don't forget, I still had studios back in Atlanta to run. I was able to go there a couple days out of the month and check on things, but for the most part, I was running it from my phone on a tour bus. This went on for 20 cities. All the while, I was building rapport with everyone, establishing more relationships, taking advantage of every opportunity I'd been blessed with. I started putting it out there that I was a producer as well as an engineer, even though those two things usually don't mix. You're either one or the other. But I knew I could be the anomaly. And one big thing I wanted was to work with Thug as a producer, and not just the engineer that he saw me as. I knew it could happen, but I had to fight to get their respect. Folks only knew me as Bricks the engineer, but I was gonna show them that there was even more to me than that. I didn't have any placement with Thug or any of them yet, so I started doing a bunch of songs with Gunna. The plan was for Thug to hear Gunna on one of my beats so he could see what I could do. I just had to bide my time. As you can probably imagine, you hear all kind of stuff when you're on tour. After one of those shows, 21 Savage let it be known that he wanted to get with Kylie Jenner. He was going to make a song for it using the word Issa that had gone viral after he used it in an interview. When he asked me if I had any beats, you already know what I said. Hell yeah. Savage and Thug started working on a song over my beat, with each of them doing a verse. Birdman was there as well. After we finished, we recorded it, put it on MP3, and Savage left while Thug and I kept recording. The song was hot, and apparently I wasn't the only one to think so. Over the next couple days, Thug and Savage kept talking about it, and I was quick to use the song as an opportunity to build relationships on both sides. So I ended up doing a couple songs with Savage too. At this point, I had done a good amount of stuff, even though time-wise, my career was relatively short so far, but I knew I loved it, and this was what I wanted to do in my life, regardless of the long hours and sometimes grueling work. But up until that point, I hadn't seen real superstardom. I was engineering and making beats for people, getting known and getting placements. Not to mention literally building 2 studios of my own, but that was pretty much the extent of it. I never saw what was beyond what I was making in the studio. I just did my thing and kept it moving to the next one. But that changed when I stood near the stage in a huge arena where Thug was performing one night. It was pitch black, and Thug comes to the stage performing Wyclef Jean. Everyone lost their damn minds. The place went crazy. It was one thing to see something like that on TV or in a movie, but it's a whole other thing to be standing right next to him on stage while he's doing it. It instantly changed my perspective because I finally saw why I was producing. The songs I was working on didn't just have to exist between the walls of a studio, on an album, or on a mixtape. They could be performed for the masses and affect people in a whole other way. One funny thing did happen though. One night, while I was backstage, I was so engrossed in a phone call conversation that I didn't even notice I had wandered onto the stage. The crowd immediately started screaming, and I looked up and realized I was front and center. All I could do was smile with ease and back off stage. A little embarrassing, I admit. When someone later asked me why the crowd was going crazy like that, I just laughed and acted like I didn't know what they was talking about. Vacations were far and few between then, but there finally came a time at the end of the year where I got a week off. I went to spend Christmas with my family and then flew to Paris to celebrate New Year's. I rented a Benz Sprinter and rode around town with my friends, enjoying ourselves and a break from the hectic tour and grueling schedule. Then I got a call from Gunna. He gave me some news that night that took me from cloud 9 to 9,000. Thug had just sent some of our songs to Drake. It was all I needed to hear. It didn't matter what songs he sent. They were all dope. The fact that they were sent to him was enough to light me up. That was a step closer to my goal and plenty of reason to turn the night into a full-blown celebration. We cracked open some Dom Perignon and continued right around the city, spraying about as much champagne out the window as we were drinking. You couldn't tell me anything. It was just another confirmation I had made the right steps towards where I wanted to be. Working on Drake's album had been cemented at the top of my goal list, and now he was going to hear what I could do. And thankfully, I had enough confidence that I was excited instead of getting freaked out. We got so drunk that night, somehow I ended up passed out in the lobby of a hotel, missing the fireworks celebration and the start of the new year. But it was all good. There wasn't much that could have topped what had already happened anyway. The next day, Thug called me and told me to meet him in Miami. All sobered up, I packed and got on the next flight, not even bothering to ask any questions. I stashed my luggage at the hotel and headed over to the studio to meet Thug. You got one. Thug leaned over and told me. I had no idea what he was talking about. What? I got one? What do you mean? He went over and played a song. It was the one we did with Savage on the tour bus. I was still confused about what was going on until I heard Drake's voice over my beat. Drake was rapping on my beat. I just stood there in shock, floored and shook in the best way. This was no doubt the biggest thing that happened in my career at that point, and I was sure this was going to change everything. Everyone was going to know who Bricks was. Everyone was going to want my beats. I was going to be famous and have my pick of major artists to work with and be able to charge top dollar for which they would gladly pay because they knew they'd be getting platinum level material. I could write my own ticket. Hearing that song was all the confirmation I needed. My life was going to change even more because of this. I just knew it. Most of the time during the tour, we do our studio work on the bus. And sometimes when we hit a larger city, we go to an actual studio. After a show in Miami, we pulled up at a studio and noticed there was a guy in a hoodie standing next to a red Bugatti. It turned out to be Lil Wayne. We were all instantly on guard because Thug and Wayne had been beefing on and off, and we didn't know what was about to go down. Thug got off the bus and walked to go talk to Wayne. And thankfully, there was no drama. They had their discussion, and then all of us, excluding Wayne, went into the studio and got to work. One thing about me, with all of my confidence, I thankfully knew I still had a lot to learn and I wasn't above instruction. And when Timberland walked in the studio, I got an unexpected but totally welcome lesson from one of the greats. We were alone for about 30 minutes, and during that time, he did a good amount of talking and gave me some valuable tips. Yet another benefit of me being on that tour, the experience and education I was getting was invaluable. When Thug came back, he and I had did a song called Casket, and then Mac Main came and got it. Lil Wayne had actually ended up doing a verse on the song, but even more dope than that, He actually used my name in the verse. A huge, huge deal for me. I was amped about that. I ain't even gonna lie. Afterwards, we went to Birdman's house on Star Island. Really, me calling it a mere house is a huge understatement. It was a $20 million mansion, and for the first time, I had seen real extravagance and opulence in person. I had never been in a mansion or seen a yacht, but I surely did that day. I really saw what putting in work and making it big could get you. The next day, Gunna and I did his first single, Caught Me a Foreign, which Thug did the verse on. Then I met Meek Mill and his team, and we worked on a song called We Ball. Things were really starting to roll for me, and the list of people I got to work with continued to grow. Lil Durk, Travis Scott, and Migos got added to that list too. I was really riding high, but the lows were just waiting their turn. Thug went to New York for some interviews, so I took my girl to Puerto Rico for a couple days. We were having a perfectly good time until I started seeing the song Issa all over the internet. That song wasn't even released yet, but there it was all over the World Wide Web, right in front of my eyes and ears. A leaked song is one of the worst things that can happen in music, since it can mess up the entire rollout. I immediately called the label and asked what the hell was going on. They said they tried to stop it, but it was spreading too fast. Every time they deleted it in one place, it would pop up in 5 more, and it was burning up the internet like a wildfire over a dry bush. There was nothing that could be done about it. Of course, I was worried about how this was going to affect me. Since I had been so excited about that song, I wanted it to be a hit. I wanted it to get released the way I was supposed to get released. Unfortunately, that wasn't going to happen. The label said they probably weren't going to release the song since the leak had jacked up all the plans they had made. It devastated me. I might as well have gotten slapped across the face. I ended up not making any money off the song, and I was introduced to the newest low of my career. But I had to find a way to shake it off and keep rolling. Leaks happen. And as unfortunate as they are, as much as I love that song, I knew I would have tons more hits before it was all said and done. I'm not going to front like I got over it immediately, but I just used the disappointment as fuel. I certainly wasn't about to let it stop me. And anyway, if there was a bright side that could be found in this mess, it was that people were at least feeling the song. Sometimes, you have to step out on faith and make a major move, even if it scares you senseless. Being complacent can be a death sentence to your goals and dreams. We don't always know what's going to happen, and sometimes that's a good thing. But don't let the fear of the unknown stop you from your blessings. Everything you want could be right on the other side of the hesitation. You just have to get over it. Who would have thought that my decision to leave everything I knew in Atlanta and move across the country would have led me to an international whirlwind, a load of invaluable connections, and a 2-year tour with one of the hottest artists in the country. But it wouldn't stop here. More was coming. Chapter 9. So by the time January 2017 rolled around, I had become Thug's right-hand man. He had a crazy work ethic, and we were in the studio for 16 hours a day. But I wasn't there as his sidekick, or even just as his engineer or producer. I had a vital job. I was entrusted with being in charge of his music, as in, I had the hard drive in his entire music catalog. I'm sure I don't have to express how crucial that is, or how he wouldn't have put that kind of trust in just anybody. If I were to lose that, I would be in some deep, deep shit. Not only did I take care of Thug's music hard drive, he left all his jewelry with me too. Oftentimes I'd be walking around with bags carrying millions of dollars of jewelry and music, which I'm not going to deny, made me kind of nervous. So things were going pretty normal, and I thought my touring days were over. But in reality, that just wasn't true. When I was in Atlanta for a couple days, I got an email from Thug's management telling me to pack my bags and get ready to head overseas. So I packed my bags and I got ready. Everyone was hyped and excited as we got to the airport in the van, especially me. Not only because I was getting to continue the tour with everyone, but I was going to get more opportunity to step up. Everyone wasn't able to go on this part of the tour due to not having passports, including Thug's main producer, Wheezy. As far as I was concerned, this could be good for me. We landed at Heathrow Airport in London and headed to the hotel, and I couldn't help but be amazed at the architecture and the beauty of the place as we cruised by in the van. We got unpacked when we got to our hotel in Mayfair, but didn't end up going right to the studio like we would most of the time. While Thug was in his room, DJ Keys, the cameraman, and I headed out to explore Oxford Circus. It was a nice bit of recreation because things were about to kick back up crazy again. The very next day, we were told to be downstairs at 6 p.m. sharp to go to sound check, or we get left. So Thug's crew loaded up, his girl Jerica, his manager, stylist, cameraman, Keisha, and myself all piled into the van and headed to the venue. After we'd been riding for about an hour, I started wondering where we were going. Finally, we pulled up to the O2 Arena, which was the biggest I'd ever seen. It was massive. We drove around the back so we could go backstage, go through security, and get our backstage passes. Now, up to this point, I had been under the impression that the tour was one of Thug's shows, but when we got our passes that said Drake, Boy Meets World Tour VIP, excitement shot through me like a rocket. This was Drake's tour. I had long established working on Drake's album as a goal of mine, and now here I was on tour with him. And I wasn't the only one that was pumped about this. The whole crew kind of knew how huge this was. Everyone went to the dressing room and got situated. There were a bunch of people milling around backstage, doing their respective tasks to get ready for the show. Usually during Thug shows, I had some free time, and sometimes I'd skip the show altogether to get some sleep. Gunna and I were hanging in the dressing room when Drake walked in. I admit it, I was shocked. By then I knew I was on his tour, but I hadn't exactly been expecting the man to just stroll into the dressing room where we were chilling. He went around shaking everyone's hand and introducing himself, as if that was necessary. All the while, my mind was swirling around how to use this blatant opportunity of a lifetime. I had already had a song with Drake, and I was going to use that to get on his album. Again, I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to make that happen, but I knew eventually I would. I claimed it, and I believed it. When it came time for sound check, I helped DJ Keys with his equipment and we followed the security to the stage. I really had no idea just how big that stage and arena was until I stepped out there. It could easily fit 50,000 people, and it looked even bigger with just a few of us in there right then. For someone like me who had never been in an arena that size, it was definitely something to marvel at. What was even more amazing than the large stage was hearing my music on such a large stage. Soundcheck is crucial to a performance to make sure that the levels are right, everything sounds like it's supposed to, and all the equipment is working properly. But the thing that was on my mind was hearing my music being played in a venue like that. Thug was going to be performing one of my songs, and hearing the product of my blood, sweat, and tears blasted in this massive London arena was the first of a major high, one that I didn't mind getting hooked on. After soundcheck, we headed backstage to wait for the show. It had almost seemed like the party had started already, with all the celebrities and athletes that were back there, not to mention the spread of catered food. There were a lot of bottles of Drake's Virginia Black whiskey, and he was giving them away to everybody. I could use plenty of words to describe how it was being on the tour, but dull certainly wasn't one of them. We watched DVSN on the television in the dressing room. They were the opening act and went on before Thug. The music was so ridiculously loud that it was even rumbling everything backstage. The stage manager came in and told Thug he was on in 5, and his stylist and him started making adjustments to his outfit and his microphone. Then we all filed out the room, 20 deep, headed down the hall towards the stage while a cameraman backpedaled in front of us, filming our stroll. Thug went to the stage while the rest of us stayed behind the curtain to watch. As soon as they saw Thug, the crowd went crazy. I peeked around the curtain and was amazed at what I saw. All you could see was thousands and thousands of camera phone lights in the dark arena. It was like an indoor galaxy. I certainly had never seen that many people in one place before, which was yet another first I experienced on this tour. The crowd went nuts again when Thug started performing his first song. He worked the main part of the two-section stage. There was a part where the performances were and another portion that went into the crowd. The crowd rocked with Thug all the way through his 3 or 4 songs before intermission. Finally, it was Drake's turn to hit the stage. The intro to More Life started playing as he walked out, and it was pure, ear-piercing, Michael Jackson level pandemonium up in there. And I thought the response to Thug's entrance was huge. Not only was the reaction to Drake on a grander level, but so was his performance. It included fireworks, explosions, lasers, and other special effects. I was just a studio guy seeing all this as Drake launches his first song, Trophies. It was way more than I had ever experienced. There I was, on tour with Thug, and a mere feet away from Drake, who I was a huge fan of, watching him perform my favorite songs. It was definitely a pinch myself moment. Drake performed all of his hits and most of his Views album before the show finally ended. As the fans were leaving the arena, our group headed backstage. We were told there was going to be a private after party, and of course I was going to that. We hung out with Drake and his team, plus a lot of other important people. It was my first time meeting Drake's crew, and I was enjoying every minute of hanging with them, partaking in the food, drinks, and music, and getting faded. It had been an extremely long day, but I was feeling no pain. And after Drake offered us use of a studio he had rented, I had even more energy. We all hopped in the van and headed over to Metropolis, the biggest and best studio in Europe. Thug works really fast, so I wasted no time making sure everything was set up and working right, coordinating with the interns to make sure Thug had all of his snacks and everything he would need to get right back to work. Now remember, Wheezy, Thug's main producer, didn't make the trip. So Thug asked me to pull up some beats, and of course, I pulled up my own. It didn't take long for him to choose one. I told you, he works fast. Really, I never seen anyone work the way he does. He'll choose a beat after hearing it for only a few seconds, go into the booth and start freestyling, mumbling through the entire track before going back to the top and recording the entire song bar for bar, replacing the mumbles with words. It's actually genius, and to me, it put him on phenom level. Of course, since Thug worked so fast, I had to too. I'd easily be doing 100 keystrokes a minute, but thanks to the chemistry between the two of us, I tended to know what he wanted before he did. The vibe was that strong. I knew how to take care of any problem that came up and work all the equipment so it sounded perfect, which was another reason he always wanted me in the studio whenever he was there. He trusted me. We worked all night, finishing up at 9 or 10 the next morning. This schedule continued for the next 5 nights. We go to the show, then the after party, then head to an all-night session at the studio where we record 5, sometimes even 10 songs. And there was no joking or playing around during these sessions. It was 100% work and focus, no bullshit. As exhausting as all this was, I knew something big was going to come out of it soon. And my instincts had a pretty good track record by then. So the grind continued. What's crazy was, I didn't even realize Drake had been in the next room working on his album during one of those sessions. I was so locked in on what I was doing, I couldn't have even snuck off to peek in on him anyway. But I saw him again soon enough, and he was with his engineer walking into the studio I was working in to drop off a couple songs for Thug to add verses to. I ended up working with Thug on 3 of those songs. I consider that another step closer to my goal. Of course, not everything was smooth sailing, There was some hiccups, which is to be expected when there's so much going on. But one night, something happened that really could have roasted my ass if it weren't for quick thinking on my part. We had done a session in a studio across town since there was an issue at Metropolis, but we were right back there the next night. Everything was going fine. The thug asked me to pull up some beats. I went to the bag to get the hard drive, but it wasn't there. Remember, this hard drive had all of Thug's music on it, so losing it wasn't an option. But I legit couldn't find it, and I knew if I had let that be known, not only would Thug be pissed, but the whole plan of me getting to work on Drake's album would go up in smoke. Telling myself not to panic, I told him I had to go to the bathroom. They kept chilling and talking while I scrambled to call the other studio we'd been at the night before, which is where I was sure I had left the hard drive. After calling multiple times and getting no answer, I hurried down to the receptionist to call me a cab, trying to keep my nerves in check. At 2 a.m, I was jetting across town to the other studio, hoping and praying that someone was there. I saw a light on in the building, and I started banging on the door until someone finally came. I told the guy that I was with Thug's crew, and I thought we had left something during our previous night's session. He thankfully let me come in and look for it. By now, at least 30 minutes had passed, and I knew Thug and everyone was probably wondering where the hell I was. I found the hard drive, and I hightailed it back to Metropolis. By now, a good hour had passed. There was no way I could tell them what really happened. But the hard drive was just too big to stash in my pocket and stroll in a room, and I knew I'd get a ton of questions about what had taken me so long if I didn't create some kind of distraction for myself. So, thinking on my feet again, I wrapped the hard drive up in my jacket, pretended that I was on the phone, and quickly walked back in the room, plugging up the hard drive while I pretend to have a conversation. I ended up telling everyone I had a family emergency to tend to, which they bought. We went ahead and got to work, and I breathed a humongous sigh of relief. Major crisis averted. Another memorable thing happened when we were in London, and this time it didn't involve me messing up. One night at the arena, Travis Scott was backstage because they were going to bring him out to perform a song. Remember me mentioning that there's a huge balloon that blows up in the center part of the stage? Well, apparently, nobody hipped Travis to the fact that there would be a large hole where the balloon comes out of. So he runs out onto the stage, yelling to the crowd, "London!" And then he fell into the hole. That was the extent of his performance. It shocked everyone. The hole was deep, and actually he broke the balloon mechanism, and when he showed up to the studio later that night, there was blood all over his leg. By now, of course, the whole scene was all over social media, and everybody was having a hell of a time clowning him about it. Being the opportunist that I am, I saw this as an opportunity to get in with Travis and earn a placement with him and Thug. But this was one time I didn't get what I wanted, because it turned out Travis made his own beats. Disappointing, but you can't hit a home run if you never swing at the ball. Things moved right along. After 6 sold-out shows in London, we took our tour bus to Leeds, England, and we did a few shows there. We worked at a studio that was on a farm while we were there, and I experienced another first, working on music for movies. I worked on the Fast and Furious soundtrack that day. Certainly not something I expected when I hopped on a plane from London to Atlanta. The blessings just keep coming. Off to Manchester for 2 shows, then back to London for 2 more. We were still rounding out the nights with marathon studio sessions, banging out song after song until morning. It wasn't until after the show in Sheffield, then we went back straight to the hotel for. It wasn't until after the show in Sheffield that we went straight back to the hotel for the first time, skipping the studio. I took that opportunity to sleep, which was something I didn't get a ton of during our crazy tour schedule. I figured we'd be off to the next city soon enough, but the following morning, I got a text telling me to pack because we were leaving, as in leaving the tour. I didn't know what was going on, but it turned out that for whatever reason, Doug wanted to leave. The manager confirmed that the tour was over, for us at least. So just like that, we were off to the airport to head home. I was especially bummed because my whole goal had been to work with Drake on his album, and I hadn't managed to work my way towards that yet. and this abrupt trip back home certainly wasn't making me any closer to it. So Drake's tour rolled on, and we headed back to Atlanta. Then came another issue. All this time, I had been on Thug's payroll and getting paid regularly as his main producer. Then, suddenly he has a blowout with his management and fires both his managers. This affected me because now there's no one in control of payroll, and I only ended up getting paid about half as what I was supposed to. Look, working with Thug had been a blessing, but it was also exhausting. The busy tour schedule, the studio sessions on the bus between cities, the all-night sessions after the shows, and not to mention being responsible for his entire music catalog and millions of dollars worth of jewelry. When Thug wanted to go to the studio, he expected me to go to the studio and stay there for as long as he did. I already mentioned how crazy of a work ethic he had, and I hadn't missed a single session since the entire time we've been working together. The experience and context I had accumulated during the couple of years we were on tour was invaluable, but make no mistake about it, the work was grueling, not fun. Regardless, I was willing to do all of that with no complaints, but I wanted to get my full compensation for it like I had been getting in the past year. I wasn't trying to hear about any issues with my money, so I pulled Thug aside at the studio that night and let him know that my check was short, asking him to get it taken care of. He assured me that he would. "I got you. We'll figure it out," he said. I took him at his word. Yet 2 more studio sessions went by with no resolution. I'm emailing people, asking them what's going on, what's going to be done to fix it, but no dollars were getting added to my bank account. It was frustrating because it wasn't like I was asking for a handout. This is money I had rightfully earned. And by this point, I wasn't about to be working for free. So when Thug called me, wanted me to meet him at the studio, I did another thing I'd never done before and turned him down. I said I was busy and couldn't make it. This caught him completely off guard because he was used to me being at his every beck and call. Because I was so integral to the sessions, he ended up not going himself. He hit me up again the next day wanting to go to the studio, and again I declined. This time, though, he wanted some answers. "What the hell is going on?" he asked me. I let him know that I had to go make some money since he wasn't paying what he owed me. My check was still short, and I wasn't about to waste time waiting for it to get resolved. It clearly wasn't a priority for him at the time, so dropping everything to go to the studio with him stopped being a priority for me. "I got you," he tried to assure me again. I wasn't buying it, and I wasn't going to the damn studio. It was time to shake things up again. My goal of working on Drake's album hadn't disappeared, and it was as good a time as any to move on the forefront. So I looked up the Drake tour schedule, packed my bags, and got on the first flight to Norway. Chapter 10. People thought I was nuts for jeopardizing my position with Thug like that. Offer some shot in the dark to get in with Drake that might not even get me anywhere, but I knew this was the move I needed to make at the time. Being Young Thug's right-hand man was a role a lot of people would kill for. But people had no idea that I had been thinking about leaving before the money issue even came up. That just turned out to be the last straw. I was done with the stress, the constant demands, the lack of respect, being on call 24/7, the grueling schedules, and not to mention not having any personal life at all. Hard work was nothing new to me, and I didn't shy away from it. But honestly, I was miserable, even with all the positives that came from it. And life is just too short to be miserable when there's something I can do about it to change it. And even if following Drake on his tour left me flat on my face, at least I wouldn't be left with any regrets or what ifs. Sometimes what seems like the crazy thing to everybody else is just the right thing for you. So armed with my backstage pass that I had gotten when I was on Drake's tour before, I went backstage at the arena in Norway, found Drake's dressing room, and made myself comfortable. No one was in there, and I took time to gather myself, part of me not even believing I was there. I might have helped myself to a few chicken wings while I waited too. Pretty soon, Drake and his crew walked in, and thanks to all the time I had spent with him and his crew during all the after parties, he recognized me. They all greeted me, and I started to breathe a little easier when his manager pulled me to the side. "Is Thug with you?" he asked me. Nah, he's not here." "Then you can't be back here, man." "Oh." He was cool enough not to put me on blast about it, and thankfully let me stay and watch the show from the crowd. I did get to crash the after party backstage though, and it was then that I started forming my plan of attack. And I knew the first thing I needed to do was get in good with Drake's security and his stagehand so I could move around backstage freely. So the tour moved on to Sweden, and I got my own flight, and I was right behind them the next morning. I chilled with some people I knew up there before heading to the arena, focused on starting my plan of befriending Drake's security. I can be so damn charming and charismatic when I need to be, and I knew that I was inching my way towards being someone that didn't need to be questioned. And I also used the fact that I had the Issa song with Drake as a credibility card and reasoning for me being there, so they wouldn't think I was just some random guy following them around. Before too long, I had gotten cool with the stagehands, and I was able to enter the sound area unbothered. Check another box off the plan. There was a day-long break before the next show in Copenhagen, Denmark. I enjoyed the day in Stockholm before booking a flight and hotel in Copenhagen. Wherever Drake was going, I was going. Thanks to the backstage pass I was still using and the rapport I had established with Drake's security and the stagehands, I could pretty much move around as I pleased by then. They all knew who I was, and I certainly wasn't there to cause any trouble. It was time to start pushing the next part of my plan. I kept running into Giggs, who was a big artist in the UK and part of the tour. So I started getting in good with him and his crew as well, making sure to tell them about all the things I had done up to that point. I stayed close to Giggs so that over the next couple shows, people were recognizing me with them. Another box checked. The next stop was Paris, 3 days later. Again, I booked my flight and hotel, following them. I was still very, very connected in Paris after having lived there for over a year. I knew all the DJs, studios, everything. So since there was no show on the first day there, I hit up Giggs and suggested we go to the studio. He agreed, and I started getting everything ready. Since I wasn't on Thug's tour anymore and was funding all these international flights and hotels, not to mention food, on my own dime, all while I had no money coming in, my funds were depleting rather fast. Following Drake's tour and executing my plan to get to work on his album had become my job, but it wasn't a job that was paying anything. Despite that though, I wasn't just gonna have Giggs meet me at the studio and that's it. I was gonna make it an experience, even if it meant more money coming out of my pocket. I called the studio that I had worked in when I lived in Paris and let them know I needed to set up a special session for a major artist. They agreed, we booked it, they sent me the invoice, which I paid. Then I called up a homie of mine and got some weed and liquor, invited some women, rented a Mercedes-Benz Sprinter van with the driver, and sent it to pick up Giggs. Then I called him and told him it was downstairs and waiting to take him to the studio. The weed, liquor, women were all waiting on him when he arrived. So Giggs and we just started vibing. I played some beats and he chose a couple of them and got in the booth. Everything was going smoothly. I recorded what he put down, and afterwards, I took some time to listen to it. That was when Giggs had a FaceTime call from Drake, who asked what he was up to. Giggs turned the phone towards me. After Drake greeted me, he said send him 3 of my hardest beats, which Giggs sent to him before we continued our session. After that, Giggs and I went to the club. Some guys from Drake's label, OVO, was there too. Giggs is a big deal in Paris, and me being with him was like an automatic stamp of approval, and I was taking all of those that I could get. The next day, Giggs invited me to the studio before the show. When I got there, it was a nice little crowd of Popcorn and his crew, and Drake's friends Nico and Baca. It was a little off-putting to see another engineer in the chair, but that was taken care of when Giggs told him to get up so I could sit down. It was going to be my first time working in front of the OVO guys, and I knew I was going to do something to make my mark. I did a song with Giggs, and Baca joined in. Everything was going great. So the OVO guys, they went out to go get some food, and Popcorn stayed behind, and I did a song with him. When Giggs and everyone came back, they asked if I had some beats. Hell yeah. Baka, Drake's artist, flips through them, chooses one, and gets in the booth and freestyles to it. Fun fact, this would later become our first gold record. After we recorded it, we headed out for the show. Now instead of showing up on my own, I'm showing up with Giggs, which is just another stamp on my credibility card. More and more people in more and more places knew the name Bricks now, and I fully intended to use that to the best of my advantage, including when we went to the after party at the club after the show. The next morning, I got a call from Future, Drake's manager. He said he had heard about me and wanted to meet. I hurried up and got my ass out of bed, got dressed, and got over to his hotel. Along with Future, Mr. Morgan, the president of Drake's label, OVO, was there also. It was just the three of us, me and two of the people closest to the artists I had been draining my bank account to follow around on tour. They said they were impressed with the session I had set up for Giggs and asked if I could do the same thing for Drake. Of course I could. This was a huge deal and I was pumped. We had made some small talk, with me being sure to mention the It's a song I did with Drake before the meeting ended. I walked out of the hotel almost in a daze. My hands were shaking a little bit. This was what stepping out on faith can get you. If I hadn't trusted God and been willing to take over the work from my fired druggy contractor, I wouldn't have 2 studios in Atlanta. If I hadn't had the guts to leave Atlanta and everything I knew to move to LA, I might not have drunkenly booked them flights to Paris and Tokyo, kicking off my international curiosity and expanding my contact circle. If I had done the comfortable thing and stayed with Thug, I might never have really gotten on Drake's radar, but now I was smack in the middle of it. This wasn't the time for a victory dance though. I still had a session to set up. I called the studio and let them know what I needed again, but this time I needed the whole studio shut down because Drake was coming. It totally floored them. After acquiring the weed, liquor, and food, I rented another Benz Sprinter van and sent it over for Drake, letting his manager know that it was on the way. While I waited, I was in the studio making sure everything was perfect. Everything had to be perfect. This was the chance I had been running myself into the ground for, and I wasn't gonna blow it. When Drake showed up, I introduced myself again, though I already knew most of the people he had with him, so it was a good look. We went in the studio and they started playing Drake's unreleased album, which blew me away. When he pulled up a familiar song, I made sure to let him know I had worked on that with Thug in London. Drake went into the booth, recorded his verse bar for bar, and I really had to keep my emotions in check. What I had been working on so hard for was playing out right in front of my eyes. Another huge box checked. We finished working on that song, then a short Nigerian guy comes in. Turns out it was WizKid, who was in Africa what Drake is to America. They pulled up the beat to Come Closer and worked on that while I was there. I just sat there and took it all in, soaking up the experience and cementing it all in my memory. The night was amazing, but the tour wasn't over. I packed my bag and booked my flight and hotel for the next show in London. And what I could only take to be another serendipitous sign, I was sitting just a row from Drake's dad on the flight. It didn't even matter that my money was low. I wasn't about to just turn tail and head home when the door was finally opening for me. Things were getting tight money-wise, but I was maintaining the best I could. There was an issue when I got to London, though. Apparently, they had changed backstage passes, so the one I had been using was no longer any good. I didn't know how I was going to get into the show since security wasn't letting me in and my charm and charisma wasn't going to cut it this time. Then I remembered I had some friends in high places now. I called Giggs and told him what was up, letting him know that I needed an updated backstage pass, and he sent someone right over to bring me a new one. That whole scene gave me a shot of renewed energy. It wasn't like I was needed on the tour. I wasn't Drake's engineer or his producer or anything else. I was the one who chose to spend my own money following them around country to country. I was hanging out with gigs pretty much every day, meeting important people like record execs, producers, and big-time artists, and falling more and more in love with London. The contacts I were making there were being filed for future reference as I began to imagine all the things I could do in this country that I managed to do on my own. There were a couple more stops on the tour before it was over, and on the last night, I heard about a party that was being held for Drake to celebrate the end of the tour. Nobody invited me, but that didn't mean I wasn't going. I managed to finesse my way in, unleashing the charm and charisma double team again. And it was a good thing I did too, because I got the thrill of my life. Drake ended up playing the entire More Life album, which hadn't been released yet. Hearing that before the world did was amazing, but I really lost it when Sacrifices and Ice Melts came on. The songs I had worked on Drake's album were playing in a room full of all these important people, and the emotion hit me right in the chest. I did it. I actually did it. That appropriately titled song, Sacrifices, was the biggest accomplishment of my career. I had told 40 during that chance meeting in the LA boutique that I was going to work on Drake's album. I busted my ass and I did it. The realization continued to pound on me as I stood there in the room I technically wasn't supposed to be in, trying to keep myself from losing it. There's just nothing like seeing all your hard work culminate into something amazing. Everything I had went through was totally worth it. I did it. The tour was over. I went ahead and flew back to LA the day after the party. As pleased as I was, and as proud as I was of accomplishing my goal of working on Drake's album, it wasn't time to chill. It was simply time to establish another goal. I called Baca, and he invited me to Drake's house. Getting an invitation to Drake's personal residence meant I was in. Excited as hell, I headed straight over there. No surprise that the house was ridiculous. Another architectural example of one of the things hard work and sticking with it and making sacrifices can lead to. We chilled some, but also worked on some beats while we were there. Baca told me they were going to Jamaica for a week to relax after the tour. I didn't go. I was back in focus mode, and I just wanted to dive back into my work. So I did a few sessions there in town before I headed back to Atlanta. But I had the growing feeling that I was leaving something undone. That new goal was continuously forming in my mind, and it didn't take long for me to decide what I wanted to do. I was taking my talents to London. Between the country, the culture, and the contacts, I knew that was where I needed to be. And not just for a visit. This was going to be a long-term stay. So I sold all of my stuff, including my car and both my studios that I was barely at anyway, and I made it happen. I made use of all those contacts I had racked up when I was there on the Drake tour and let them know that I was coming. Setting up meetings. This was exciting. The next phase of my life. I could just imagine what an impact I could have on the London music scene. And of course, I wasn't going to stop until I had. My next goal of taking over London was officially underway. Hey guys, this is Bricks, and I want to personally thank you for taking the time to dive in and finish the book that I wrote. It's been an incredible journey. I know you guys enjoyed it. I want to personally invite everyone who finished the book to join a private group, an elite group of producers. It's called the Bricks Academy Elite, where I'm personally going to take a few people up under my wing, and I'm going to teach them everything that I know about beats, how to get placements, how to get sales, how to take your career to the next level. It's going to be a 12-week one-on-one program, a deep dive where you're going to work directly with me, and we're going to work on every single aspect of your beats, your marketing, your mindset, everything that it takes to become successful as a producer. I want each and every one of you guys to apply because I can only accept a few people, but send me an email at Bricks Placements. That's Bricks, BRICKS, Placements, PLACEMENTS @gmail, and put the subject Bricks Elite application or Bricks Elite mentorship application, and I'm gonna have somebody from my team reach out to you and we're gonna see if you're fit. I can only take a few people, but it's definitely life-changing and it's definitely gonna take your life to the next level. Send me an email, guys, at Bricks Placements, and I can't wait to hear from you. Once again, thanks everyone for enjoying this book. I put my heart and soul and my life into this book, literally. So see you guys soon.
So I want to share a quick story, explain with you who I am and what I do. My name is BricksDaMane. I'm a music producer from Atlanta, Georgia, and I don't work with the biggest artists in the world: Drake, Gunna, Lil Wayne, Young Thug, Lil Baby. You name it, 21 Savage, I don't work with them. And not only was I able to do that, I done spent the last 3 years helping hundreds of producers just like you start from absolutely nothing and start selling their beats, getting their first sales, getting their first placements, getting their first plaques, even some people getting record deals, bro. You need to surround yourself with people that have accomplished the things that you want to do in your life if you want to win. And that's why I created the Producer Pathway. What is that? The Producer Pathway is the #1 community for producers where we're growing, learning, connecting, and simplifying the process of producing. You're going to get access to 5 hours of course videos taught by me. You're also going to get all of my kits, all of my loops, all of my MIDI packs, every single thing that I have to offer. You're going to get. Also, I'm going to give you a copy of my newest book, Brick by Brick, where I started from absolutely nothing and told the story about sleeping in my car to working with Drake and working with the biggest artists in the world, how you can do the same thing. You're also going to get access to the Bricks Academy Lite, which is a super light version of my 6-week-long program where producers learn how to sell their beats, get placements, start networking, and start getting progress. You need to be around people that build you up instead of break you down, and that's why we do weekly Zoom calls with the industry's top producers so you can connect with them one-on-one and start networking. Bro, for everybody that's on this video right now, I'm gonna do something so special. I'm gonna offer all of this stuff at a price that is truly ridiculous. If you're a music producer or a beat maker, this community is for you. Lock in right now and become a founding member before the price goes up, guys. You're gonna be getting weekly calls, kits, MIDIs, plug-in presets, melodies, copy of my book, a copy of my course, a copy of my... Actually, I just did a viral content creation guide. I also put that in there. It's a whole bunch of awesome stuff, guys. The time to act is now. Join the community. Just remember, sometimes it's the smallest decisions that could change your life forever. Get around people that are winning, that can show you that everything that you need to know to take your career to the next level. This could change everything for you guys. Click the link, join the community, and I'll see you guys there.